Hello, Lisa. So, um, I'll introduce you to my team. So, me and Beatriz, we met Lisa at Singularity University. We we met each other on the dinner, and we talk about a lot of things. And she was a medical director in a hospital in Bronx, and we are talking about purpose in life and how to handle with anxiety and a lot of things. And she was giving us a lot of advices. So we invited her to share the same advices with the whole team because we felt very happy after the dinner with her. So welcome, Lisa. Feel comfortable.
That's so sweet. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you for having me. So nice to see you, Renan and Bea, together again. And to meet everyone else on the team. I think I can only see like 8 people on the screen, but nice. Thank you everyone for inviting me, for taking the time to also be with me today and listen about this topic. And so first, my name is Lisa Young. I'm a family medicine doctor and I'm a life coach also. So I help people, busy people who are stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, free themselves from stress and anxiety so that they can be their best selves, live their best lives, and make their dreams a reality. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And that's a little bit of what we talked about at dinner when I met you guys in Sao Paulo, right? So first of all, I imagine that all of you who are working at a rapidly growing startup in Brazil during a pandemic never feel stressed or anxious, right?
Right. Of course.
So of course you do. And of course I am just kidding. And that's why this topic I feel like is really important. And it's really important to me that hopefully through this talk that I'm able to provide as much value as possible to you guys. Excuse me. And part of that is because even though part of that is because I'm not a stranger to stress or anxiety myself, right? Not that long ago, I did not know how to manage my stress or anxiety well at all. And in fact, I had good reason to, right? I was a medical director in the Bronx, running a few clinics during the pandemic, during COVID. So I had a lot of reasons why not to take care of myself, why to put things off, why to put other people's needs in front of mine, my patients, my employees, my nurses, all the staff members, right? And I wasn't putting into practice the things that I knew, even as a doctor and somebody who knows the things to do to manage stress and anxiety. I wasn't putting it into practice myself because there was a crisis, right? And the problem with that is that over time, was detrimental. Over time, maybe for a few minutes, for a day or for a week, my body can handle it. But over time, prolonged periods of time of that, over and over, some of you may relate, trying to get as much work done as possible, grinding, feeling like you're rushing against time, trying to check off as many things off your to-do list as much as possible, right? You never have enough time. And so many other people depend on you, right? So you keep putting yourself last. You keep not taking care of yourself, not managing your stress, not managing your anxiety. And then what happens? You end up totally burned out like I was, potentially totally depressed and like I was, potentially depressed and burned out often also mean that the things that you used to love doing, I love taking care of patients, I love helping my team, teaching them, empowering them, all the things that you love to do, all of a sudden you could care less because you're just disconnected, you feel numb. Can any of you guys relate to that? I see some nodding heads here. And so that was the low point for me. And over time, when I realized what was going on, it was a wake-up call. And so with that, then I started to take the very intentional and conscious steps that I needed to implement the things that I knew I needed to do to manage my stress, manage my anxiety, take care of myself first so that I could better take care of my patients and everyone else around me, my loved ones, my colleagues, my employees, my staff, right? And I also hired and I worked very closely with a coach as well, myself, so that I could really implement all these steps. And it took a lot of very intentional, purposeful, in some ways, simple but not easy work on myself to now bring me to the place of where I am now, which is I still have a lot of things that are stressful in my life, right? Like there's still the pandemic going on. I still, I'm building a coaching business, which anybody, if you're a part of building a business, that in itself is stressful. There are financial concerns. There are loved ones who are sick. I still have lots of things that can be stressful in my life. And yet I am so much better able to handle it now. And despite all of these things going on in my life, I am living my best life. I'm feeling more fulfilled, more happy, more inspired, and more able to contribute and help everyone else around me. And not only that, now that I've learned to do it for myself, I now have the privilege of being able to teach other people, my patients, my coaching clients, and now you guys to share a little bit of the wisdom that I've gained so that hopefully you guys can also benefit so that no matter what's going on in your life, you can be in the same situations that you're in right now that could cause stress, but doesn't mean that you have to feel stress or feel anxious. How does that sound? So I'm curious, actually, maybe just to have an idea of, and get everybody to interact a little bit. What would you rate your level of stress in this past week from 0 to 10? 0, and I want you to think about this for a second and then put your answer in the chat so I can see just where everyone is in general. And this is how stressed or anxious you've been feeling this past week. 0 being not stressed, not anxious at all. 10 being so stressed, so anxious that you're overwhelmed, it's affecting you every day, and you can barely get through your day without feeling it. So if you can take a moment and put it in the chat, I would appreciate it, just so that we get an idea what's going on here. And be honest. I know you guys all work together, but I think that Freya would be okay with you guys being honest with your levels of stress. Great, thank you. So let's see. I see some. I think the lowest one I see, there's a 3, 4, that's only 1, couple 4s, some 6s, a few 8s and 7s. So no one's feeling 0 stress. Everyone's feeling at least moderate to maybe 8, I would say pretty high levels of stress. And that's okay, it happens, right? It's a normal part of life. And the only reason why I want to check in is because first we need to know where we're at to then be able to shift it and hopefully get it to a lower level so that you can, like I have been able to, be even more productive, even happier, and still be able to handle all the situations that you're in currently without feeling the same level of stress. So I want to briefly go over, so you have an idea of what I'll go over today. My goal, I hope, for this talk to be as valuable for you as possible so that you can actually take some of the tips that I share, learn some of the information, and apply it to your life. And we also only have a limited period of time, so I'll share as much as I possibly can. I'm going to start off talking about what. So meaning what is stress and anxiety, briefly talk about that, the physiology about it. So what's happening in our body to make us feel what we do feel when we're feeling stress and anxiety. And then after that, just so that we have a basic understanding. After that, talk about a little bit about why. Why is it so important? And it may be self-explanatory, but really highlighting why it's so important for us to really recognize and address and manage our levels of stress and anxiety as soon as possible. And I would say now, like immediately. And then after that, I will go into the how. So in terms of the how, I will share a couple of techniques and tips that I found helpful for myself, for my patients, for my coaching clients, to help them in the very moment when they're feeling stressed. And also a couple of tips of how to prevent feelings of stress over a longer period of time. So the goal would be prevention, so that you don't even have to feel it to begin with, right? And of course, since we only have a limited period of time, I won't be able to go into all the tips and tricks and solutions that I have. With that being said, during the time that we have, with that being said, because I know I won't have time to go into all of it, I also have created a free guide for you with much more details about all of this information, more strategies, more solutions, more resources that you can do and look at that I'm happy to provide for you guys, so that you can really apply it to your life. And let me take a moment. I will put the link to this guide here in the chat for you. Let me copy and paste. So hopefully you guys can see that. And you can use that link, and all you have to do is put in your name and your email, and then I will email you a link to this free guide that I've put together. So not only will it synthesize all the information that we shared, the what and the why, and also give you even more details of what you can do to combat and manage your stress even better. How does that sound? And at the end, I think hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A and feedback and anything else that comes up. So if you have questions, feel free to write them down now, and then I invite you to ask them at the end. All right, cool. So in terms of what, the first part is what, right? So what is stress and anxiety? I put those two together in this talk because stress and anxiety, really, they're very overlapping, especially in terms of the symptoms that people experience and how people experience what they feel when they feel stressed or anxious. And so stress and anxiety both are our body or mind's reaction and response to a perceived threat. And in terms of stress, focusing on that for a moment. In stress, often the perceived threat is something external. It's an external situation or stimuli. And I want to pause here for a second because I want to differentiate. This is important for later when you learn how to manage stress. There's a difference between the feeling of stress and the actual stressor. So the feeling of stress that you experience and the external situation or stimuli that is causing that feeling of stress, because those are two separate things. So said another way, two people can be in the same exact situation. Let's say you're running late for an important meeting. Same exact situation. One person can feel lots of stress, and one person might not feel stressed at all. So what's the difference? The difference lies how we perceive internally, how we interpret internally this external stimuli or situation. So that's really important, because once you're able to separate out the stressor, that external situation or external stimuli, once you're able to separate that out from your feeling of stress, then you have the power to cut it off, meaning you have the power to perhaps change your interpretation or perception of this external stimuli that's happening, the situation that's happening, the pandemic, someone in your family is sick, you're having financial trouble, whatever is happening in your life, right? Once you separate that, then you can choose to interpret it differently and do the work with coaching, with whoever, however else you decide to do it, to interpret it differently, sometimes on a conscious level, sometimes on a subconscious level, with coaching. Then you may be able to dissolve your feelings of stress completely and still have the same situation happening. Does that make sense? Great. So now anxiety is very similar. And I'll go into the physiology because the physiology is essentially the same with stress. Anxiety often, sometimes can happen without an identifiable trigger. And so in that case, anxiety often is described as basically prolonged periods of apprehension or dread, feelings of apprehension and dread, in response to situations that might not actually be threatening. And so these feelings can linger, even if the stressor or whatever situation, and it could be internal, a fear, these feelings can linger for a period of time, even if there isn't actually a real threat, or maybe the threat is gone. So what happens in our body when we are feeling stress and anxiety? So physiologically, because this will help explain a lot for you to understand later on, in our body, basically, both in stress and anxiety, our brain, specifically the amygdala, which is a part of the brain, triggers and produces stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and that puts us into fight or flight response. So fight or flight has been around since humans have been around, right? And fight or flight is meant to protect us. It's meant for survival. Back in the day when we had to run away from lions or bears, right, to really protect us when we were in immediate danger. So what happens when we're in fight or flight? We have to be able to protect ourselves, either fight or run away, right? So what our body does is it shifts or redirects blood to the parts of our body that are most important to keep us alive right now, right in this moment. So that includes our major muscles, our major muscle groups, so that we can run away or we can fight, right? That also includes directing more blood through the heart. The heart pumps faster and harder, so your heart rate goes up. So some of you might notice when you're feeling stressed or anxious, your heart's beating really fast, you have palpitations. That's because physiologically it's supposed to do that, so that your blood can go pump through the rest of your body and supply the rest of your organs that are important. It also allows your lungs to, you breathe deeper so that you can you breathe faster so that you can bring more oxygen into your blood, which then goes to the organs to supply it, to make it function better, right? And so when you're anxious or stressed, often people are hyperventilating sometimes if it's extreme, right? And the other thing is that your liver releases more sugar, because when you are feeling stressed, if you are in immediate danger, you need to run away from a bear, or you need to fight a bear if you chose to do that, then you would need more energy. So you need more sugar in your blood system, right? So that's basics, some of the very basics of what happens in your body. At the same time that all of this is happening, blood is also diverted away from the organs that are not important. So that includes your digestive system and your sexual or reproductive organs too. And also, in fact, it also directs you away from your hands, your fingers, and your toes, right? Because those are less important. If you're running away, you need the major muscles, not as much the periphery. And so that's why you may notice when you feel stressed or anxious, you may notice that your hands or your feet feel a little bit cold. Does that all make sense? Awesome. So all of these things, like I said, is evolutionary. Your body is supposed to be doing this. And so, in fact, stress is actually good for you in the short term, especially if you have an immediate or real danger, right? So now I want to go into the why. If stress is actually good for you, why is it so important for us to be talking about it now? Why is it so important for us to be able to recognize it and manage it and even prevent it? That's because in today's society, in today's world, we're not that often running away from bears and lions. Sometimes maybe if you're hiking or something, maybe you're doing that. But in today's world, so many people, unfortunately, are experiencing prolonged periods of stress and anxiety. And so in these experiences, when you have prolonged stress and anxiety, the very things that physiologically, that changes in our body, the very things that happen to protect us, that would have saved us from that bear, are the very things that are now going to cause problems that are detrimental to us long term. So, for example, if you are, and long term is more than a matter of minutes, right? Your body is not really meant to experience stress or anxiety for more than just a matter of minutes. In the few minutes it takes you to run away from that bear, then your body's supposed to recover. But right now in today's society, a lot of people don't experience that. And they have these heightened levels of stress and anxiety that don't really go away, unfortunately. Or they take much longer to go away than our body is meant to handle. So for example, let's say the stress hormones, right, make you more alert so that you can fight or flight. But because you're more alert, and if the stress hormones keep pumping through your body, then you might have trouble sleeping. If you have trouble sleeping, then you might have less energy, be less alert during the day, the next days later, weeks later, probably just days later, actually. Have trouble sleeping. If you have trouble sleeping, what happens to your energy level during the day? So you have lower energy level. As a result, you're probably less productive, less focused, less efficient, less creative. And you probably will be making poor decisions, right? Your head is not as clear. There are a lot of other physiological reasons for that, but also poor decision making. And that's sort of more short term, right? If it's only going on for days or weeks. Not only that, lack of sleep, in addition to having high levels of stress hormones pumping throughout your body, that can lead to mood changes, irritability, which can in turn, Raynon is telling me yes, mood changes and irritability, which in turn can affect your relationships, right? And your ability to connect with people. That could be the people that you're working with, right? And in your team. Or it could also be, unfortunately, with the people that you love the most, your loved ones, your families, your friends, right? Because you're not able to eat, you're barely surviving. You're not able to show up for yourself. How can you show up for other people? Right? And another thing that happens when people experience stress and anxiety is that, especially when it's more than for just a few seconds or a few minutes at a time, it can feel really uncomfortable, right? And so when we feel uncomfortable, there's a tendency to want to avoid those feelings. And so what can happen if we're not really conscious or intentional about it, often people numb and distract. And by the way, you guys can feel free to continue. I see some comments in here. You can feel free to put in comments or questions or whatever else comes up. So I appreciate the interaction, especially since I can't see everybody on the screen. When we numb and distract, sometimes that can look like emotional eating, right? We say eating our emotions, right? We might be eating junk food even though we're not hungry, because temporarily it gives us some relief to feel a little bit better. We may be mindlessly scrolling through social media, not even really reading or listening or watching whatever is going on, but we're just mindlessly scrolling because we're trying to numb ourselves and distract ourselves from what we're really feeling. Or that could be mindlessly watching TV. Over time, that if we're trying to avoid those feelings, right, we can also, that also can lead to, you can imagine, procrastination, and then poor time management. And then if you walk that out and you do that longer and longer and you procrastinate more and more, you manage your time worse and worse, what do you think happens to your work and career life, your business, your health, your relationships? It affects everything, right? So the other thing, these are sort of a little bit more like shorter term consequences, let's say for days or weeks. Now, if we, maybe months is a little bit more chronic, I would say. If it's going on the order of months or even years, and I'm really taking the time to go into this because I really want everyone to understand why this is so important. It's not just, oh, I feel stressed, oh, I feel anxious, okay, I'll deal with that later. Because I'm going to tell you why, when you procrastinate and deal with that later, why it's going to be very detrimental to you. Because when you play that out for months at a time or for years at a time, that's when you start to not only have burnout, you could have depression, anxiety disorder, panic disorder, right? Those are kind of some of the more obvious things. Insomnia, I don't know if I just mentioned that or not. Those are some of the things that may be more obvious. The less obvious things, but I want to reiterate, and which is why I explained the physiology. So imagine that you needed increased energy levels when you were in fight or flight. So your blood sugar increases. But over months and years, what happens? That can lead to diabetes. Your heart needed to pump, was doing what it's supposed to, pumping faster, beating harder. But over a long period of time, what could that lead to? High blood pressure, heart disease, which includes heart attacks, heart failure. The other thing that can happen, right? So your body was smart. It was doing what it's supposed to do, diverting blood away from your digestive organs and also from your reproductive organs. Short term, no big deal. Long term, you can have chronic digestive problems and chronic digestive illnesses and fertility issues. So, chronic long-term stress and anxiety are not a small deal. It's really important. And that's why I wanted to take the time to really emphasize this part first before we go into the how, because it's more important than some people realize. And when we don't realize why it's so important, sometimes it's easy for us, like me, right? Even though I was a doctor and I knew all the right things, to just put it off in terms of managing my stress, managing my anxiety, taking care of myself, because it's easy to let everything else feel and seem more urgent and more important. But your health, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual health, all of these parts of wellness are so incredibly important and fundamental for you to even continue life, and to live life in a way that you can contribute even more to everyone else around you, right? Contribute to your family, contribute to your friends, contribute to your team, and to the world, right? You guys are doing amazing work as a team. And you are making a difference in the world. And imagine if all of you, those 8s and 7s and 6s in the stress level, if that were closer to like, you know, a 1 or a 2 at least, like let's say, like how much more could you contribute to the world? How much more creative could you be? How much more innovation could you come up with if you did it, if you weren't feeling stressed or anxious? How many more risks would you be more confident and able to take in your life personally, or also within the team in this company? How many more risks would you be willing to take? Risks that are necessary for success, right? Risks that are necessary for growth. Because unless you take risks or make changes in your life, nothing is going to change. Nothing's going to improve. And so one of the reasons why this is so important is because one of the only, well, actually, the only constant in life is change. And so the more we're able to handle and be comfortable with uncertainty and change in our lives, because it's going to happen anyway, right? You're going to have things happen in your life that are changes that may be potential stressors, but don't have to cause stress, right? The more comfortable you are able to become with uncertainty and change, the higher your quality of life. The more you'll be able to be your best self, live your best life, and make your dreams a reality, truly.
Or be miserable.
Say that again?
Or be miserable for the rest of your life.
Well, so that's why I guess part of what I'm saying here is that we get a choice. Part of why I wanted to separate out, well, what's the stressor versus the feeling of stress, is because in between we have a choice. Right? And so what I'm trying to share with you guys is that it may feel like sometimes when you're on a deadline, when something serious is happening in your life, when we're in a pandemic, when you maybe lost your job, or when you have so much on your to-do list and really you don't feel like you have enough hours to get it done, right? Sometimes we feel like we don't have a choice. But actually, we do have a choice in how we manage it, how we perceive and interpret it, to the point where then we don't have to be miserable. You can be if you run by default and let all these emotions take over. Absolutely. It's very possible. In fact, a lot of people are right now, because there's been so much that's happened in the past couple of years that a lot of people succumb to all of these stressors, right? But I guess my goal here is to empower you guys to know that you have a choice. You don't have to be miserable. That what if I told you that everything in your life, all the stressors in the life could be exactly the same. You could be in the same exact situations that you are right now. And not only not feel stressed, but also really feel free and be in flow. Be more creative, be more productive, be more loving. What if I told you that was possible? Who would want that? Raise your hand. Because imagine, even just within your work environment now, right? you guys are all part of a team, which is beautiful. And I love, first of all, that all of you guys have come together to this. And if every team and every company were able to do this, I think this is so important, like to even be able to talk about stress and anxiety and how to cope with it. I think this is a token to what you guys stand for and that you care about everybody on the team. I think it's so beautiful and important, and I'm really grateful to be here. Just imagine if you had minimal levels of stress and experienced minimal levels of anxiety. I was starting to say before, how many more risks would you be willing to take? Risks that are necessary for you guys to achieve innovation, for you guys to disrupt the industry, for you guys to come up with new products, for you guys to achieve success, right? Because when you're not feeling anxious, you're not going to be in your head. You're going to be less indecisive about it. When you're not feeling anxious, you're more likely to take action and follow through. When you're not feeling anxious and second guessing or doubting or questioning yourself, you're more likely to take the risks that actually will lead you to success and growth. And not all risks lead to success, right? Not every single risk, but the whole point, especially in a company like yours, right, is that there is no such thing as failure. If you continue trying, if you continue to grow and learn from anything that doesn't work out or is seemingly a failure. Because if that's the case, then really these failures, these quote unquote failures, are actually just bricks along the way that are paving the way to success. But if you are stuck feeling completely stressed and overwhelmed and completely anxious and having panic attacks even, right? I've had patients who have that and clients as well. If you're in that state, are you really going to be able to create and innovate and contribute the best that you're able to? So, and also, as I was saying before, it just really, it's not just about being more productive, right? I mean, I think that's great in some ways, but it's also, it affects every aspect of your life. It affects your relationships, your connection, your level of fulfillment, your enjoyment of your life, enjoyment of what you're doing, your work, and all the everyday life things. So I'm looking at the time now. It's supposed to be a 20-minute talk, but it's not happening. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into the how now. And I'm sure that's what you guys would love to hear about. And I know that we've only have a certain amount of time here today. And so I'll put the link here again for you guys if you're interested, because I will send everyone who clicks this link and puts their information in, I'll send you a free, really comprehensive guide with many more tricks and techniques and strategies that'll help you manage and cope with your stress and anxiety. Because everybody is different, right? Something that might work for me might not necessarily work for you. And so sometimes it's about really individualizing it, managing it, and trying different things and to see what really works for you. And that's why if you are able to that's why I wanted to provide this guide for you, basically. So you guys have a whole menu of different options to try and see what works for you. And there's even more out there. I can't list all of them, but it's a start at least. So feel free to put your information in there, click on the link, and then I will send you the guide. Okay, so in terms of the how, first, I want to share what not to do. Because like I said, a lot of times we have a tendency when we are feeling stress or anxiety to attempt to numb or distract. And I mentioned some of those earlier. So honestly, mindlessly doing anything, But especially nowadays, it's mindlessly scrolling through social media, watching TV shows, whatever it may be. Excuse me. And emotionally eating, mindlessly eating too, right? Eating not because you're hungry, or you're not even really enjoying it, right? You're just mindlessly eating because it makes you feel better and it's distracting you from what you're really feeling. So I would say not to do those things. And the thing is that when you tell someone not to do something, it's hard to break that habit. Habit forming is a whole nother talk in itself. And when I say not to do them, ideally, if you find yourself numbing or distracting with any of these examples, I would suggest replacing it with something else. Because that then is more likely to be sustainable, as opposed to if you say, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to eat the cookies, I'm not going to eat the cookies, the likelihood that you're going to eat the cookies and keep thinking about the cookies is pretty high. But if you're like, oh, I'm going to go out for a run, or I'm going to go make this delicious salad for myself that's going to make me feel better, then at least your brain and your mind has something else to focus on, right? The other thing I would say to avoid that I didn't mention yet is that sometimes people try to manage or cope with their stress with substances. Substances can include caffeine, right? Coffee. If you're so exhausted, overwhelmed, burned out, you're barely getting enough sleep, you might need to stay awake, right? So you might be pounding coffee, who knows, Monster drinks, energy drinks. I don't know if they have Monster in Brazil. So those are substances that are temporarily getting you by, continuing just to barely get you by. You're barely surviving, right? In addition, then, if you're so wired up and hyped up with all these, not only energy drinks, caffeine, but also the stress hormones that are pumping through your blood, you're probably not going to be able to sleep at night, right? So then some people resort to alcohol to unwind. And then with alcohol, your sleep quality is very poor, right? Or they might resort to drugs or sleeping pills. And that's just some of the examples, but you can imagine how this could then become a vicious cycle, because you're giving your body all these uppers and downers, and then your body now is all haywire and physiologically. So I would say these are things not to do. That's a brief list so far. So what to do instead? First, as I said earlier, awareness is really important. So some of you may already know, okay, I feel stressed pretty often, I feel anxious. You might even be able to notice that. But there are some people that don't even realize they're so hyper-focused on whatever it is they're doing, they may not realize it. So taking a moment to be aware, because we can't change the things that we aren't aware of, right? And so being aware of anything that is a sign for you that you are starting to feel stressed or starting to feel anxious. Ideally, you notice it in the beginning, because then it is easier to manage, and then it is easier to reduce than when it's gone on for so long and so extreme that it'll take more for you to manage and eliminate that. Does that make sense? So what are the triggers? If you have an important deadline coming up, and you know that every time you have a deadline that comes up that you're going to feel certain levels of stress and anxiety, then maybe preventatively you could come up with, okay, I know I have a deadline next month. I'm going to do all these things leading up to it so that I will feel less stressed, right? So if you know your certain triggers, things that happen around you that tend to lead to stress, then you can potentially plan around it, schedule, prevent it, right? And also just warning signs for you. If you start to feel like your hands are getting clammy or cold, your like heart's beating much faster, your like mind is racing, right? Whatever your triggers are, whatever your telltale signs are, noticing them so that every time you notice, oh, okay, I think I'm starting to feel stressed or anxious, then you can pause, take a deep breath, and then implement some of the strategies that I'm going to share. Sound good? Okay, so I'm going to see if I can condense some of these things that I was going to share. So in terms of managing your stress acutely, I'm going to focus today just on in the moment when you're acutely feeling stressed, because long-term chronic stress would be a whole nother talk that is separate. And it's a little bit harder to manage. And that's, I personally have helped a lot of patients and coaching clients alike through that. It just takes a lot more work and it would be harder to explain in a short period of time today, right? So acutely, things that you could do right away. So one of the quickest ways to manage and combat our stress, feeling of stress or anxiety in the moment, I'm going to walk you guys through it right now, actually, just as an example, is changing your physiology. So what does that mean? All these things are changing in our physiology, in our body, our heart racing, our breath faster, all these things that makes us feel stressed and anxious. Now, if we also address the physiology, often through breathing, then we can often calm those feelings down. So one technique that I've shared with a lot of my patients and clients alike, and in fact, I taught one of my patients before she was having panic attacks almost every single day. And I don't know if any of you have experienced panic attacks, but panic attacks feel like you're having a heart attack. Often people go to the emergency room because of panic attacks. It's not just your run-of-the-mill anxiety, right? So she was having almost daily panic attacks and severely depressed and had other mental health issues as well. And I taught her this super, super simple trick, or breathing technique. And I had her practice it when she was feeling well, which is an important thing for you to know, right? Practice it when you're feeling well, so that when you're not feeling well and you notice those warning signs, that you can implement it easily and you don't, and it's like second nature. You don't have to think about how to do it, right? And she was able to then prevent her panic attacks from happening because she noticed it, she did it, and then it went away. She didn't end up going to the emergency room, almost nearly as much, like she almost barely went to the emergency room after that for anything related to panic attacks. So the exercise is 4-7-8 breathing. So inhaling through your nose for a count of 4, holding that breath for a count of 7, which sometimes can be hard in the beginning, and then really breathing out as slowly as you possibly can for a count of 8. And repeating this several times over and over again. And the reason why this works is when you exhale, so there are lots of different breathing techniques out there. Many of you might have tried some. Breathing really helps calm down your nervous system, especially if you breathe slowly and deeply. And if you breathe and exhale longer than you inhale, then that kicks up your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relaxation part of your nervous system, as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system, which is what kicks up during the fight or flight response. I'm wondering, I was going to have you guys try that, although now I notice the time. So I would recommend ideally, I would have done it together with you guys, just because for sake of time, I also want to save some time for questions and feedback. So I would invite you guys to try it at home yourself. It sounds super simple, and it really is, and it really does work, right? Just remember my patient who prevented panic attacks and didn't go to the hospital because of it. And I would do it when you're feeling well. Even if you just practice doing it 5 times in a row, which is like probably less than a minute, at most a minute long, you will notice how you feel afterwards. You'll start to feel more relaxed, more grounded. And I've taught, one of my coaching clients actually is a singer. So she performs on stage all the time. And she's like, I love singing, but why the moment I get on stage, I feel so anxious. What do I do? How can I bring that level down so I can sing more clearly and my voice opens up? And I also taught her, among a few other things, as well as this breathing technique, right? And she's like, oh my God, I feel so much better now. Thank you, right? Because sometimes we need those really quick tips that will help us right away. Other things that change physiology very briefly, like some of you may have heard about power poses, right? Like Superwoman or Superman poses. There's some old studies about that. before, where it can change how you're feeling, your body language can change, right? And also just moving your body physically, whether it be exercise or dancing, jumping up and down a few times, because that can also release endorphins, which are positive and counteract some of the stress hormones. And so sometimes, so not only physiology, well, if we shift what we focus on, and I'll go through this super briefly, but if we shift what we focus on, if we focus, instead of focusing on the thing that is stressing us out, whether it's external or internal, whether it be the situation at work or our fear, then we can focus on gratitude, on what we can control. And I'll put in the guide also, I'll put in a simple technique that's also very quick, similar to the 4-7-8, maybe even quicker actually, that really shifts your focus to one of your senses and really can help you calm down too, very easily. Language also is important. Like I said earlier, how you interpret and perceive what you're feeling and the situation can make a huge difference. So if you feel anxious and you feel excited, the symptoms often are pretty similar, right? So if you tell yourself when you think you're feeling anxious or nervous, oh, I'm really excited. I'm excited to go on stage and sing now. I'm not nervous. What are you talking about? I'm so excited. That in itself, it sounds silly, but can trick your brain into relaxing, right? Because you're interpreting it completely differently. In fact, I have another coaching client who she's gone through some major changes, like major relationship broke up when she thought she was going to get engaged. Her career now is at a standstill. She had to close the company she was trying to lead, and now she has no idea where she's going to make money, what her career is going to do. She was having anxiety, I mean, understandably, so badly. She couldn't focus on anything. She couldn't sleep. She just didn't know what to do with herself. And I worked with her, worked on some of her beliefs and things like that, and also helped her with some techniques, including when she's feeling that way, she's feeling all of this stuff bubble up, something simple like just taking a few deep breaths, closing your eyes really slowly, right? Take 3 deep breaths, feeling into your body and your heart, and then saying something. So this is language, saying something to yourself like, I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm loved. Something as simple as that can really make a big difference. And then from that place, then she had much more clarity. She's like, oh my God, now I understand. Now I know what I'm going to do. Now I have ideas. Now I feel motivated to get out of bed. And then she was able to make those changes in her life that she needed to do, but she was paralyzed to be able to do anything or make any decisions when she wasn't able to relax that. And then I'm going to skip over a few things, but then there's lots of different things that you can do in terms of prevention, making sure you have, I would go into this more in depth, maybe if I come back sometime for another talk, but having really routines that in terms of prevention, morning and evening routines that really get you in the right mindset, right? And then also creating strategies for yourself, action plans, right? A lot of times we all create, I'm a to-do list queen, right? Like to-do lists galore, like tons of to-dos, but really how many things on the to-do list have to get done, right? So I also have another strategy that this is more action plan strategy with my coaching clients that I work with them on, where first you figure out what is it the result that you actually want? Why do you want it? And then what are the actual action steps, the parts of those to-do lists that actually get you the result? Because sometimes we put things on our to-do list and we're just checking them off, but they might not be actually the things that make the most difference in terms of getting us the result that we want. So then why are we bothering our time or energy with that, right? And the other thing I would say before maybe wrapping up at the top of this hour is really optimizing your environment. So in your physical environment, in your office, and you're even on your desktop and your phone, is it all cluttered? Tons of tabs, tons of papers everywhere? Like that's going to clutter your mind. The other thing is minimizing notifications, having periods of time when you don't even check your phone, right? And also I would consider what ideas are you feeding your brain, right? This is another part of your environment. Is your social media or filled with, when you do check your social media, is it filled with things that are actually inspiring you? People that are inspiring and encouraging, or is it people that are complaining or focused on fear, right? So all of these things really make a big difference. And the last piece is mindset is really important. So this for me, actually, now as a life coach, less coffee, yes. Daniel says less coffee. And for me, mindset and psychology, mastering that for me is the juiciest part of being a coach, because that is where you can make the biggest difference. Some of you may not realize you have underlying beliefs that are affecting how you're approaching every day. And sometimes you need the help of a coach to help guide you towards to uncovering that and then working through it. So I had a coaching client who, she was so stressed out. She was working long hours. Some of you may be able to relate. Working long hours, stressed out, tired, overwhelmed. She lost interest in the things that she wanted to do in her personal life, and even in her professional life too. And then as I worked with her on our coach with specific types of questioning, then I realized what was underlying all of it. She had this belief subconsciously, I don't ever have enough time. There's just not enough time in a day. There's just not enough time. I always have too much to do, too little time. And that's a belief, actually. That's not necessarily a truth. So I have a lot of skills and tools that I use to, on a subconscious level, even help people break through some of these beliefs, release some of these beliefs. So at the end of it, she came to realize, like, oh my God, time is just a perception. Like, holy crap, now I feel more free. Now I have, with the same amount of time, same amount of things to do, now she felt so much better. And so she finished those tasks faster because she was more in flow, and she was more at ease and less stressed and less anxious and less overwhelmed. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that because I went way longer than I thought I was going to. Thank you guys for being patient. We had said, Renan and I, like 20 minutes, but apparently I got excited and shared a lot today. So just a reminder, if you want that free guide, click that link, put in your name and email. I'm happy to send you. And also, actually, I'm happy to send you the free guide. Do we have time for some questions, Renan, or?
Yeah, sure. I think that everybody is very connected with you. We don't gonna rush with the time.
Oh, well, I know you guys have things to get back to. So if you guys have any questions or feedback for me now, I would be happy to answer. And so, do you believe it is healthy and possible to be productive at all times, in moments of relaxation too, for example? I'm not sure, well, what you mean by moments of relaxation, but productivity. So my first initial answer to that, is it possible and healthy to be productive at all times? It depends on how you're measuring the productivity, right? I think sometimes we need to remember that we are human. We're not robots, right? And so just like nature, everything else in nature, there's a natural ebb and flow. And so productivity in how it is defined traditionally, right? Getting things done is the traditional definition, I would say, right? Like getting things done, that you can sustain that for longer periods of time when you're in flow. You can sustain that for shorter periods of time if you're feeling high levels of stress and anxiety, right? So that's one point. And the other point is that when you're highly productive for a certain period of time, it is natural, normal, and even healthy, right, to allow your body to unwind and relax and recover. And part of the problem, especially when I was medical director on the front lines, doctor, taking care of sick patients with COVID, family members with COVID, all of these things, I wasn't allowing my body to rest or recover. I told myself a lie. I had this belief, I don't have time to. Right? I'm sure many of you have told you guys yourselves that. Sometimes doctors are really bad at this, actually. I don't have time to go to the bathroom. Maybe you guys experience this too. I don't have time to sleep. I'm going to cut down on my sleep so that I can get more done. But the problem is that when we do that, we don't let our bodies are pretty resilient, but over a period of time, when we don't let our bodies recover or rest, it becomes problematic, like what I was saying before, right? And so, in fact, the lie is that you don't have time to take care of yourself and recover. The truth is that you don't have time not to. Because you think you're saving time, maybe energy, you think you're saving time now, but actually you're costing yourself more time, more energy, more productivity later on. Imagine if you were to walk that out further. You're depressed, you're burned out. Maybe you have diabetes, maybe you have heart disease, maybe you land in the hospital. How much more time, more energy, more money is that going to cost you? So that's just to put it into a little bit of perspective. Does that answer your question, Bianca? Yes, okay. Any other questions? Is it possible to not be anxious when your job is to show risks and wrongful attitudes that no one wants to hear and seems like a barrier to innovation? How to cope with that? I'm not sure. What do you mean by your job is to show risks and wrongful attitudes? You can type it in or maybe come on and share with the auto. So I just want to make sure I'm answering the question that you're asking, Vanessa.
Hi, Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So when you work like in a regulatory area, or your job is to show laws and stuff that may be seen as a barrier to ideas, and they are only things that happens. They are situations from the world outside from the idea, and they are interpreted as barriers to the idea, not as things that we must address when we are thinking about something. So the anxiety comes from the place that you must be as the one that says to everyone that's wrong, and we can do something about it, but it's only heard that that's wrong and that you are the person that is saying that.
Thank you for sharing that question. And that makes a lot of sense. First of all, right, I also want to take a step back and say, if you are feeling stressed or feeling anxious, or maybe even more extreme, burned out, depressed, having panic attacks, right? First, I want to say you're not broken, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of you or anyone else that experience any of these things. So I want to eliminate any element of judgment or criticism of yourself, because that only makes things worse, right? It's just more about, if we know this is happening to ourselves and we're feeling this, and we know the detriments that it can have on us and our relationships and our life, then, and we have a choice to live a better life and feel more at ease, then why not, right? So if you're feeling this way, there's nothing wrong with it. And similar to your question, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're in a role, which some others may be too, like in leadership positions, management positions, where you may need to tell people things that they don't want to hear, things that they might get upset at you for, right? That as a person who you might care about how other people perceive you, right? that can be very painful. And like you're saying, causing anxiety, causing you to feel stressed. So first of all, that's totally normal. I think most people, especially, and me included, right, was a manager, medical director telling people no and things like that. Like that can be really uncomfortable. And it's normal to feel anxious or stressed about it. And I would say it is possible to not be anxious. So directly answering your question. And in order to do that, part of it is also, part of it is the techniques that I shared, but some of it may also be more of the mindset and the psychology that I was talking to you about, which is what I find, what I'm most passionate about as a coach, and what I find is most powerful. Because if we are able, if we believe that, often we have subconscious beliefs that we're not good enough, that we're not loved, right? So if someone's upset at you or you're giving them bad advice and they don't like it, it's natural and maybe pretty common for you to interpret it and say, subconsciously feel like you're not safe, like feel like you're being either attacked or feel like you're not enough or that you're not loved. But maybe they're just upset at the situation and you're just doing your job. And maybe they still appreciate you as a person, but in that one situation that you're telling them that something that they don't like, they're just reacting to that situation. And maybe they have some stuff going on in themselves, right? Sometimes, often when we're going about our day, especially this is most evident with strangers, if you're going about your day, someone treats you badly sometimes, or they have a bad attitude, well, more often than not, it's something else going on in them than something with you, right? But we often, especially if it's friends, close people that we work with, we feel like it's an attack or says something about us. So that's where, for example, with a coach, you may be able to tease some of those things out, identify what's underlying why you're feeling this way, because your brain immediately makes the connection. Oh, I told them something, they don't like it, now they're upset and angry, and now this must mean something else. And that's why you start to feel anxious and stressed and probably start to avoid wanting to have those conversations. And so that's where with a coach, you can really tease it out, figure out what's really underneath all of those layers, and then work on it with a process like the ones that I've used to help people subconsciously to let it go and then feel more free. Then you can do your job freely, do your job, share the information that might not be taken well, but also realize it has nothing to do with you and you're still a good person, you're still loved, and you're more than enough. Does that help?
A lot. And also I just like to ask how to work that out as a group, because I think it's necessary to feel safe also, and people understand that that may happen to any of us in any situation, that we must engage into any discussion that different points of view are necessary. And the anxiety may happen to every one of us, even if the role is not supposed to be that. So what can we do as a group to make everyone safe, and to really talk it out, what they want to talk, or have a discussion that is healthy in the end?
Do you mean in terms of sharing, like if people are feeling stressed or anxious or have things that they're dealing with?
I mean, more like in a job or in a project that we are discussing things not only regarding ways of dealing with things, but in any environment that we must engage into a discussion, just to, as a group, understand that what can we do, what tools can we use, like to start a conversation with that, and both sides know that that it's a situation that will be uncomfortable, but they are safe there to talk it out.
Thank you for that question. I guess a few things come to mind when you ask me that. The first thing is that the culture of a team and a group and a company, right? Especially, I imagine that you're talking about where you're working together and some of these situations may come up. The culture of a team and company, the building and maintaining of that culture is pretty nuanced and there's a lot of factors that contribute to it. And part of it, there's lots of different, there are lots of different aspects of it, but part of it has to do with how the company views this in general, right? And often that lies with top down, the CEO, the founder, middle management, whatever the structure may be, for everyone on the team, especially those people, to emulate and embody that this is a safe place, right? You guys are all about innovation and creation. And from what I've understood, especially in my conversations with Renan too, like the culture ideally is for everyone to feel safe, to take the risks that you need to, like I said, to come up with innovation, to take the risks, to experiment, so that maybe you'll fail, but maybe you'll make a huge success and a great innovative discovery. So making it safe to take those risks professionally within the job, and then making it safe to have conversations. And I think maybe another way that could be, there's a lot of different ways that you can make that culture feel safe. Part of it is even having a discussion about this, right? I don't know very many companies that would invite someone like me to come talk to you about stress and anxiety, right? So that you can all be better, because this is for your benefit personally too. And it has ripple effects too, in terms of how you show up at work. But that in itself, I think, is showing, to me at least, the values that you guys hold as a company. And Renan, and who I met in Sao Paulo, what is important to you guys, right? Because your wellness is also the wellness of the company. And I think another way is to have a culture where there's some sort of like feedback system, meaning that either it could be a group setting, it could even be group coaching, right? Sometimes I've done group coaching sessions with groups of people where it's not just one-on-one. Like one-on-one is really powerful because I can really individualize, but group coaching, we're in a group of people, like I'm the coach and you guys can share in a safe space. Sometimes, like in residency, I had support groups, right? Everyone's on the same, like everyone is part of the team. And this is a safe place for you just to share. It's not necessarily even work related. Share anything that's coming up for you emotionally, personally, to make it more real, so that there's a human connection in the team. And then if it's a group coaching, which support group is a little different than group coaching, then I, for example, like you're doing now, like you could ask me a question, and you can bring up something specific and I could coach you through it or walk you through an exercise. And then we could do that. And everyone also else sees and learns from that. Sometimes it's more powerful when we see other people, because we're not as open to seeing our own stuff sometimes. And also that just sets the tone for, okay, this is a safe place. I can share. I trust my fellow coworkers. I know that if I get feedback, I'm not going to get run. If I give feedback honestly about how I'm feeling, how I'm doing, or even feedback about the company and how things are going, or ideas that I have, that I'm not going to be turned away or reprimanded or have any sort of, let's say, punishment if I make a mistake, right? And my understanding from what I've understood from Visto.bio is that there isn't that. Like the idea is that you guys encourage experimentation. You want to take more risks so you can make more innovation and things like that. And so that can apply on the business side, but also personally too. If one of your teammates is going through a hard time, it's so much better, I think, in terms of having a cohesive team, for them to feel comfortable sharing with you, so you guys can support each other. You guys can step up and help if you need to. That was a very long answer. Hopefully that was helpful. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're so welcome. I have a couple questions here, and then maybe if you guys have additional questions, I'm going to give you my email address so that I don't go way over on time, and you guys can directly email me with questions. Also, in that link that I'll give you the 2 links again. The link for the free guide, when I send you the email, it'll also include a link if you are interested to have a free one-on-one intro call, 15 minutes with me. If you have specific questions or something, I'm happy to offer that to you guys too. So this is the link for the free guide, and I will send you an email once you fill that out. And then to directly email me would be here with any additional questions. All right, so I have GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder. This is the next question from Daniel. And sometimes the 4-7-8 breathing does not work, or I don't feel able to do it. Do you have any other tips? To be concise, yes, I have lots of other tips, and I will provide that in the guide. Daniel, I invite you to click on that link that I just copied and pasted, the one that says free guide. Fill out your information. I'll send it to you. It'll have many more techniques in there. It's just that I've gone way over in time and haven't had a chance to share all of them. So thank you for asking. And like I said, not every technique works for everybody. So that's why you have to experiment, just like in your job, experiment, try different things and see what works. And then the last one, do you think that people who are more nocturnal and tend to adapt to morning life may not be able to sleep early or have all this productivity in the morning and be more productive at night? Or do you think this is a myth? Interesting question. Well, I think 2 things initially come up. I'll think about this a little bit more too. And Aria, if you want, you can put your email address in that when you click on the guide, and then I'll think about it more and maybe have a more detailed response for you. And I'll, if Renan can send me all the chat recording too, I will look through and make sure I answer more comprehensively. The first thing that comes to mind, I think, is that we are all, well, one, we're all different. So I always, with my patients, with my coaching clients, I always honor their individuality, right? So if you're truly nocturnal, if you truly feel like you're much better at night, and you're more in flow at night and more productive, then I would say listen to your body. I never tell anyone what to do, right? I give suggestions. I invite you to try it. And I also want you to tap into what's true for you, what works for you, because the answers are actually all within you if you are able to connect to your heart and connect to your inner wisdom, right? So I would say listen to your body. If that's what truly is going on, then maybe you can adjust so that you're taking advantage of the times when you feel most alert, most awake, potentially more in flow and more productive. The other thing, though, is as humans and people evolutionarily, we are made to naturally, biologically, follow circadian rhythms that are associated with the sun and moon cycles, right? Sunrise, sunset. And so naturally, that's what our body physiologically would do if we weren't surrounded by all this blue light screens and fluorescent lighting everywhere. That's artificial lighting in our places. So I would also question, is it possible that you think you're nocturnal? I used to think that too, actually, for myself. If you think you're nocturnal and you think you're better and more awake and alert at night, but maybe it's because you have all the screens on all the time. Maybe all the lights are on. Maybe you haven't set up, you're not actually, your body's not exposed to the natural ebb and flow of daylight that it's supposed to be, that allows you to then produce melatonin that makes you feel sleepy, that then gets you, because it's also healthy to be sort of aligned with that cycle. So that's my quickest answer. If we have, thank you guys so much. I'm so glad that we were able to chat, and thank you for staying on the call for so long and for your participation and questions and feedback. I appreciate that. Maybe take like just a minute or two at most, just to, I would love to hear if people are willing to share, what did you find most valuable in the talk today? So for example, what were your key takeaways? You can type it in or share it verbally if you want, whichever is easier. And right now it looks like he has a lot of notes. So what did you find most valuable about this talk? And what would you like to learn even more of, let's say, if we were to have another talk?
Okay, so I was thinking that in the beginning of your talk, you said that you lost love of your work because of the continuously anxiety. So I was thinking if you recover this love, and because you told me that your main role was like Vanessa and Bianca that did great questions here,
Hmm.
and that your role is to say no to people that were asking for medicines for anxiety.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that part. Okay. So what is your question?
So my question is, did you recover from this burnout that you had and you?
Absolutely. So I'm here as an example to show you that it's possible, right? Even if you're completely burned out and depressed right now, which hopefully, like, which I don't know if some of you may be, right? Sometimes it's hard to tell. It's possible to get on the other side, feel so much better, and recover, like Renan is saying, and find joy and love and passion in your work. So for me, I also was able to, not only was I was able, but once I able to shift that while I was a medical director and take better care of my patients, I also, I mean, I love my patients, like their whole entire family. Some of them drove from out of state to come see me. Like I just like, it was beautiful and I love them. And I was able to tap into that connection with them, be there for them more. And the other thing, actually, it's interesting in my story is that I found that I had an even greater passion and an even greater purpose in my life, where I believe I can help even more people in an even more profound and transformative way. And now that is coaching. And so my focus now is so much more on coaching, because this is what I realize changes people's lives. And often I work with people one-on-one. I'll do talks like this. Actually, in fact, especially if you guys click put your email in the free guide link, next week, yeah, exactly in a week, I am going to do a talk all on radical self-care and true wellness, which is very related to this topic, anxiety and stress. And I'm co-creating with a couple of other people what we're calling a self-love summit. So part of it is virtual, part of it is in person in Puerto Rico, actually. So I'll be in Puerto Rico. But the virtual part is on the 16th, I want to say. I can send you the information and the details so that you guys can link in and join and watch. And it'll be a whole day, not just me, whole day, the virtual part, whole day of all sorts of people sharing all sorts of things, all related to self-love, which is also an important part of self-care, anxiety, and stress reduction.
Nice.
So
So
I will
I
share
mean,
that information with you.
I'm anxious to everybody goes to Puerto Rico. Maybe we know our next trip, right?
All right, well, that too. Yes, we can have a field trip and then we can meet in person.
Yes. So my last point is that you ask what we feel, né, to discuss more about, is that sometimes it's harder to differentiate state of flow with anxiety, because I see that the whole thing in most of the times are in state of flow. They are just, wow, we are on the flow and the results, and how to handle that feeling correctly, and to differentiate from anxiety and keeping this flow, because this flow is good, right? Your blood also flows to your body and your mind, and see that you are surfing in your results.
I love it. All right, so I'm this out. Everyone else, if you want to, I would love for invite you to put in what was most valuable for you. If you have, and then if there's anything else you would want to hear more about, so that in case I come back for another talk or maybe do future talks that I can share with you with through email, then I can answer them. To answer your question, Renan, what comes up for me is you're saying, what's the difference between flow and anxiety? And how can you maintain that flow without feeling anxiety, is my understanding. And so the short version, this is a simple answer, but actually is pretty complex. Often we go about our days, actually often a lot of people go about our lives doing in order to try to be. Meaning we are checking off a lot of boxes, trying to get a lot of things done. And let's take it away from work for a second. We're trying to do all these things, checking off all these boxes, perhaps to feel happy, perhaps to feel fulfilled, perhaps to feel at ease, perhaps because we think we're going to feel more confident as a result. Whatever it is, we're doing these things to try to be. That's why often you see a lot of people who are super successful, super wealthy and rich, and celebrities even, super successful in objective measures, but actually really miserable and depressed, and some have even committed suicide. You've probably heard of, right? Because doing all these things does not get us the being necessarily. So does doing things and checking off lists get you to flow? I would argue not necessarily. I would say in life, and even with what you're talking about in flow in general, what's actually more important and more counterintuitive, and what most people do not do, is be first, the being first, and then allow the doing to come from the being. So I know that might sound like, I see people like, wait, what does that mean? So the idea is, and I'm sharing this because it sounds like kind of like, what? And I'm sharing this because I've experienced both. And I know the difference now. And without having experience, it's hard to explain. But for example, people think that they need to do whatever things to then be happy. But really, you have to be happy first. And then everything else will flow. So for example, flow, there's a lot of science out there. It's kind of can be described in a lot of different ways, but it's like flow is kind of like being in the zone. And often it's not associated with anxiety. If you're truly in flow, those stressful feelings, it's more associated with like ease, right? Because you're in flow, it's just flowing, it's ease, right? It's smooth. And so getting into a place where you're feeling ease, maybe even peace, maybe even certainty within yourself, confidence, faith in yourself, that you are enough, that everything is working out for you, that everything will be okay, right? When you get into that place and you tap into that, you be first, then the doing will be easy. That's when you're in flow. That's when you're just going to check off the things that, oh my God, is that only like half an hour? Holy crap, the whole day, that's when it's so much easier. The thing is that we're not necessarily taught that, and we're not necessarily intuitively, we don't really think that. So it's really about all these techniques, and that's also why coaching can help and different techniques can help. That's why I say morning routine. Before you start your day, before you look at, Beatrice and I talked about this actually, now I remember, don't even look at your phone. People say this all the time. Don't look at anything.
Galera, this is the best tip that she gave me. So wake up, don't look at your phone, and mind your goal, your life goal, maybe perhaps your daily goal, right?
Yeah, so it's about when you're first awake, all distractions out of the way. Phones, ideally, not even near you, right? Some of us have a hard time, probably feel uncomfortable thinking that your phone's going to be in another room, not even right next to you. Computers off, everything. Wake up with your mind still clear as you're waking up. So perhaps meditating, perhaps reflecting. So what I do in the morning, actually, now that works for me, I take a few minutes to meditate. There are lots of, I'll include in the guide meditation resources, different types of meditation. There are lots out there. Also, then I take some time to pause, feel into my body, and I reflect. What is my intention for the day? What is my intention and my goals for the week or the month or the year? So that you get so clear on what's most important to you before you start getting distracted and pulled away by different emails and text messages of people asking you to do a million different things. Because when you're clear on that, and then why you're doing that, why you want that, then imagine how easy it'll be for you to prioritize the things on your to-do list so that you can focus on the things that get you there. So you're not distracted by all the other things that might not be actually moving you forward towards your personal or professional goals. And then after that, actually, the last part of is moving my body and exercising or dancing, which I think is a lot of fun. So that's my morning routine.
Nice, nice. And you think that before sleeping also reflects how was my day?
Oh, yes. So evening routine is just as important as morning routine. Not a lot of people talk about, not a lot of people talk about evening routine, but that's just as important because that's winding yourself down, one, to calm yourself down so that you can sleep better and have deeper sleep, but also setting yourself up for the next morning, right? So again, I would recommend turning off your phones at least an hour or more before, turning everything off, no screens, no blue screens, which is also better for your sleep so it allows your brain to rest enough so that you can get into the deep sleep that's actually restorative and it'll help you be more creative and all that stuff. But winding down, turning off all your screens and notifications. And I also have a practice of, do something relaxing to take care of yourself, and two, reflecting. And this is where the focus can be really important. You can reflect on what wins or celebrations did I have today? Because so often we go about our days, especially when we're busy and running around or grinding, checking out to-do lists, sometimes we don't take enough time to celebrate ourselves. And when we celebrate ourselves, even if it's like, oh my God, I got up today, even if it's as small as that, then we can create positive habit loops because you're giving yourself little dopamine hits. And then you start to enforce that behavior, right? And then, so what wins and celebrations do I have? How can I be proud of myself today? What am I proud of, right? And also, what am I grateful for? Because when you're focused on what you're grateful for, if you're truly focused and feeling that, then it's really hard to feel really any other negative emotion. And gratitude, there's a lot out there on that too that I can talk more about, but gratitude is a very powerful emotion to tap into. The more you tap into it, the more you can feel yourself feeling more that peace and ease, actually, that will then allow you to feel the flow.
Yeah, nice, nice. I think that the flow for me, as what I understood, is to don't get caught by the trap about what others are judging about me, and if I'm a better person or not. I'm just feeling, and this is good, and don't mind about that, and be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we can take this conversation for a long time. And
apparently.
Lisa husband also is coaching, and he coaches like for 5 hours in a row, right? So I'm feeling the same.
My friend, but yes.
Oh, sorry.
Not his,
Sorry.
my friend. Yes.
Sorry,
He's a speaker. He's a speaker. No.
Yeah,
That's
no
okay.
No worries. So I think Lisa, it's a great coach. So I invite you all to be in touch by her email that we have in the invite, and try to have a coach with her. It's awesome. Thank you, everybody, and see you in Tandem.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so grateful that I had the privilege of talking to you and meeting you guys virtually, and everyone is participating. Maybe someday I'll be back in Brazil. Hopefully I can learn more Portuguese by then. And if you have any more feedback or questions, feel free to email me at the email I put in. I am excited to share with you the guide. I'll probably send it later next week, but just put your email information in there. And then if you do that, I'll also send you the information for the Self-Love Summit next week if you want to tune in. So
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
bye.